The Exploits River, with its mighty flow of water rushing and tumbling towards the sea, was once the natural highway for the Beothuk Indians, traveling to the coast and far out to sea in their birch bark canoes. The Beothuks were the native inhabitants of Newfoundland at the time of European settlement, and for a long time lived in many parts of the island. Their origins, though uncertain, are thought to be related to earlier cultures who occupied Newfoundland many thousands of years ago. As hunters and gatherers, they followed a seasonal round of seal hunting, fishing, collecting birds' eggs and shellfish along the coast in the spring and summer. During the fall and winter, they traveled up the river to hunt caribou, beaver, waterfowl, and to collect berries. Birch bark and animal skins were used extensively by the Beothuks. With a mixture of red ochre and grease, they painted their bodies and everything they owned. This appears to be the origin for calling them Red Indians. They lived in harmony with the lakes, forests, coasts, and animals in Newfoundland until its discovery by John Cabot in 1497. This marked the beginning of the end for this unique race.
With the coming of European fishermen, the Beothuk way of life began to change. They were quick to recognize the advantages of metal tools over their own bone and stone tools. The fishing stations, often abandoned during the winter months, provided the Beothuk with a wealth of materials such as knives, fishhooks, sailcloths, and nets for the taking. The returning fishermen retaliated by destroying camps and canoes and killing Beothuks. The Beothuk's bow and arrow was no match for the European firearms. The pilfering and retaliations continued. By the mid-1700s, the colonial government became concerned over the plight of the Beothuk and their rapidly declining numbers. They organized several expeditions up the Exploits River in an effort to make friendly contact with them.
The first was made by Lieutenant John Cartwright in 1768. Cartwright's journey traced the river and gave a valuable description of the previously unexplored interior. From his accounts, it can be concluded that the Exploits Valley and the Bay of Exploits was the last stronghold of the Beothuks. Between Bishop's Falls and Badger, which he called Flat Rattle, and Ranger's River, the banks of the river were well inhabited. Numerous habitations appeared as they journeyed towards Lieutenant's Lake, now called Red Indian Lake. An interesting member of the expedition was a Beothuk Indian known as Tom June, captured as a child some years previously. Tom June advised Cartwright on the geography of the area and described the place where a great part of his tribe lived. Cartwright called this place June's Cove, and it is very near present-day Millertown. Cartwright failed to meet with a single Beothuk. He did, however, obtain first-hand information about their way of life.
In 1811, Captain David Buchan made by far the most ambitious and promising expedition of all. Buchan made contact with the Beothuks by surprising an encampment while they slept. His expedition, however, ended in failure and tragedy when the Beothuks killed 2 of his Marines left in their camp as hostages. Another significant part of Beothuk history was the Peyton expedition of March 1819. That previous fall, John Peyton, a businessman from Exploits Island, was living at his fishing station on Lower Sandy Point. A large open boat loaded with salmon, furs, and other personal articles, including Mr. Peyton's watch, was cut adrift by the Beothuks, who had been keenly observing all activities from their lookout on Canoe Hill. With the hope of recovering his possessions, Peyton got permission from the government to go in search of the Beothuks. They surprised an encampment on Red Indian Lake and succeeded in capturing a young woman, Damastuit, Mary March, as we know her. Her husband, Nanos Abbasit, in a confused scuffle, was killed attempting to rescue her. She left behind a small child who died several days later. Damastuit was taken to St. John's. While there, Lady Hamilton painted her portrait, the only one known to exist. Damastuit's health was failing, and the authorities decided to return her to her people with the hope of establishing friendly communications. Captain Buchan and John Peyton sailed to the mouth of the Exploits in the HMS Grasshopper. Unfortunately, Damastuit died of tuberculosis on board the ship at Peter's Arm on January 8, 1820. Her body was conveyed up the Exploits River and left for her tribe on the shores of Red Indian Lake.
The Beothics continued to diminish in numbers, and in 1823, 3 Beothic women, Shannon, her mother and sister, starving and in poor health, gave themselves up to some fur trappers, who took them to John Peyton on Exploits Island. They were later taken to St. John's, showered with gifts, and returned to the Charles Brook area, with the hope of rejoining their tribe. The older daughter and aging mother died soon after, leaving Shannon. She returned to Exploits Island and resided with the Peytons for 5 years. In an abandoned graveyard on the island, Mr. Peyton's tombstone can be seen today. While Shannon was at Exploits, William Epps Cormack, the first white man to walk across the island of Newfoundland, founded the Beothic Institute, an organization of concerned citizens who wished to save the Beothics from extinction. As a ward of the Institute, Shannon was taken to St. John's. Her drawings, encouraged by Cormack, who added the explanatory notes, contributed greatly to our knowledge of the Beothics. Her extraordinary powers of observation and memory are displayed in her maps, which again prove the significance of the Exploits River to her people. Her drawings also tell a lot about Beothic life and culture, the structure of their mamatiques, tools, and utensils, and some evidence of their religious beliefs. This self-portrait is the only known image of Shannon. On June 6, 1829, Shannon died of tuberculosis. She was buried in the cemetery of St. Mary the Virgin Church on the south side of St. John's. The actual gravesite was destroyed to make way for a street. A monument has been placed in the area. She was very likely the last of her race, for all further attempts to locate Beothics proved futile.
Their extinction resulted from a combination of factors. Obviously, the conflict and retaliation of the white settlers had a considerable effect. Starvation contributed to their demise because the Beothics were reluctant to travel to the coast, even for the badly needed food. They were also suffering from the ravages of European diseases. Numerous accounts have been written about this sad chapter in our history. Through these writings and Shannon drawings, archaeologists have been led to make many discoveries. A local resident, Mr. Don Locke, devoting most of his life to the subject, has uncovered many Beothic artifacts and house pits. He also found this piece of a watch at Lower Sandy Point. It dates back to the 1700s. Could this be John Peyton's? Some of the Beothic sites along the Exploits River are 4 Mile Rapids, Wigwam Brook, Pope's Point, Red Indian Falls, Red Indian Lake. Other findings have been made near the Bay of Exploits, including this large Beothic site at Boyd's Cove, burial sites on Swan Island and Comfort Island.
Beothics no longer roam the lakes and forests of central Newfoundland, but we are endeavoring to keep their memory alive. The following are reminders of this important part of our history. Buchan's Island, the largest island on Red Indian Lake, as well as the mining town of Buchan's, named in honor of Captain David Buchan. Also near the town of Buchan's, Shannon Brook. On the Buchan's Highway, near the spot of her capture and return, Mary March Brook and Mary March Park. At Indian Point, near Millertown, where Buchan's Marines were killed, there are replicas of Beothic mamatiques. At Red Indian Lake, this hill of red ochre is a reminder of a Beothic custom. Beothic Park, near Grand Falls. The Great Waterfall, Grand Falls, and the Indian Path, used as a portage around the falls, were described by both Captain Buchan and Lieutenant Cartwright. The Indian dock, where the Beothics repaired their canoes, is in the area of the mill yard of Abitibi Price in Grand Falls. Mary March Regional Museum at Grand Falls, where Beothic artifacts are on display, and just behind the museum, the Beothic Village. At this replica village, you can find out more about the Beothic lifestyle. Walk through the trails and experience the culture of a lost race who made their final refuge in the Exploits Valley.